Matt McCloskey,
Hello?
thanks for coming out all this way to your normal place of work.
Yeah, a whole .9 miles from my house. It's a rough trek, man.
Yeah.
It's difficult, especially in this terrible snow. And
Oh yeah, the
oh my
almost clear
goodness.
streets.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, howdy all. This is Kyle Whittington. Today we're gonna shake it up a little bit. So as some of you may know, that I recently moved to Steubenville, and since then this has just been kind of like my favorite haunt here at Chesterton's. So Matt McCloskey here, he runs Chesterton Cigars, which you've probably heard of from Pints with Aquinas. If not, whatever. They actually have a YouTube channel. I'm going to have that link down in the description, so feel free to check it out. So Matt, one thing that I wanted to talk about today is just kind of like the just the bare basics of a cigar. So many people like, oh, yay, cigars, or you have somebody walk in, they look like they act like they know what they're doing, and then you watch them and you just go, oh, you're clearly clueless. So I guess walk us through a little bit of the culture, a little bit of like if you're new, how do people view you?
So as far as new smokers, kind of the approach that you should have is just be humble and basically let whoever you're working with know that you don't know anything. Is that it was one of my most favorite interactions that I have with customers is when they tell me they've never smoked before, they've had something a couple times and they liked it. I get to provide my expertise in my field and direct you to an experience that I want you to enjoy. I've had so many people come up to me and say, oh, I tried getting into cigars, but the cigar I had was terrible and I don't ever want to revisit it. It's like, man, if you would have, came to me or somebody that I know that also takes pride in their work, we could have recommended something that was, perfect for your palate, had an enjoyable experience, So yeah, approach the situation humbly, and
Okay.
You'll get the most out of whatever shop you're going into.
Cool. What are some tip-offs that you see that, like, when you see them do this thing, you know that they're a novice?
Kind of the tip-offs I see is when people come into the shop and they kind of don't acknowledge that you're there, and they just kind of walk around looking at, the building and then walk into the humidor without saying a word. It's kind of funny. It's like, hi, I'm here, and I try to approach them, but they're kind of awkward about it. Also, when they, kind of look around and they start asking, like, oh, do you have Cubans? It's like, no, Cubans have been illegal for a very long time.
Since JFK.
Since JFK, exactly. And or they'll start asking for brands that aren't available in the United States. And, they've heard in the media, things like that are just big name brands, but not necessarily have great reputations within the industry now. Might have been a different story 30, 40 years ago. But, now the environment's changed, the market's changed for cigars. So it's kind of the tip-offs I see that, help me realize, oh, this guy might be new to smoking. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like one of the best things you can do is if you're new, you want to get into this, is just go to your local cigar shop, go to the guy behind the counter,
Yeah.
and just say, hi, I'm an idiot. Can
Right.
you help me?
Yeah, like I know nothing. I like to drink this. I like to eat this. I'm planning on eating this later. Every little kind of tidbit information that you think might help will help. Because that's their job, is to help match a cigar with your flavor profile, something you want to experience, things like that. So, yeah, like I said, just approach it like, hey, I know nothing. Please help me.
Cool.
Yeah.
So just off frame here, you've selected a couple of cigars for us. Why don't you, why don't you tell us a little bit about these?
Yeah, so these are JFR Connecticut in the Super Toro size. So just real quick, the Super Toro size is a 6.5 by 52. So a Toro typically is 6 inches by a 50 ring gauge. And so cigars are measured in inches and ring gauge in the United States. That's how you measure sizes and things like that. But specifically, the JFR is really cool. It's made by a company called Aganorsa, which, if you know me, that's one of my top favorite companies of all time. And it's a Connecticut, so it's nice and light, perfect for an early morning smoke or midday smoke, or smoke that if you're not eating on a full stomach or something like that. It's very easy. It won't put you on your butt because of all the nicotine content. But specifically about this JFR, Connecticut compared to other Connecticut's, it has so much more flavor than your Macanudo Cafes, your Rocky Patel Connecticut Edges, things like that tend to be more popular in the industry. This is definitely more of your not as well known Connecticut's. It seems to me that Connecticut's within the industry tend to be made for that kind of older generation that likes a very singular flavor profile, consistent all the way through in the flavor. Not much flavor tends to be what happens in the industry with the older style Connecticut cigars. But one thing I really appreciate is a very dynamic, flavorful cigar, and JFR Connecticut's probably the best option you can get in a Connecticut, especially for your budget smokers. This thing here is $7.50.
Oh, nice.
It's cool. So JFR, Aganorsa named it JFR, which stands for Just for Retailers. So they only sell it to companies that have a brick and mortar location. So your online only stores aren't getting these. And it's still their ultra high premium tobacco that they make on their farms. It's made at their Tabsa factory, well, since we renamed, but their factory in Nicaragua. So it's still the best construction, best tobacco, but it's only sold to brick and mortar stores. And so they're able to offer it to us at a good price. So in turn, we offer it to you guys at a great price. And bang for your buck, there's nothing better for this if you're being mindful of price.
So the Connecticut, so just to, I guess you probably mentioned this and I'm forgetting, but the Connecticut leaf is this lighter color, lighter smoke. So it's going to be a lot easier, especially if somebody's new, but still enjoyable for somebody who's
right.
a little bit more seasoned.
Yeah, so there's really, in the cigar industry, there's hundreds of different tobacco varietals. And really from Connecticut, there's two kind of seeds that are very popular. There's Connecticut Shade and there's Connecticut Broadleaf. So the Broadleaf tends to be, in the name, it's about 18-inch wide, leaf. And what people are able to do with that is ferment it for a lot longer because it takes a long time for all the basically the water to drain out, dry up, and cure. So you're able to ferment it for a lot longer, so you get a lot of darker, more heavier flavors, sweeter flavors. So that's very popular, but definitely not for the new smoker. The regular Connecticut Shade, so the Connecticut seed was one of the first seeds taken from the United States and grown elsewhere. So with this seed, you can kind of get two effects. You can either get the shade or the sun-grown. Sun-grown's not as popular anymore. Probably about 15 years ago it was pretty popular, just because it's easier to grow. In order to get this nice light color compared to a Maduro, you have to either grow it under something like cheesecloth, which what they do in actually the state of Connecticut and some other countries, and in Cuba they grow it under cheesecloth. But where 90% of Connecticut shade-grown tobacco is grown is Ecuador. Ecuador has tons of cloud coverage throughout the year, especially throughout the growing season. So they're naturally able to get this nice light shade. And the light shade, like I said, produces much less nicotine, not as much flavor, but also in terms of aesthetics, it's a beautiful light-colored wrapper.
Cool. Well, let's stop talking about it and let's light it on fire.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I guess, okay, so you've got some stuff here.
Yep.
So, you know, we've got a cutter. Can you just, I see this one's got like, what is this called here?
Yeah, so that's called a pigtail. It's actually an old Cuban style to have what's called a pigtail, and it's basically just excess tobacco leaf wrapped around the top. And if you ever seen old cartoons where they're smoking cigars, you always see them bite the end, spit out, and then, light it. That's where that's from, because it's a little, basically, nub. And what people in Cuba do is they literally pinch off the pigtail, and you're able to draw through it and, light it up.
Cool.
But we're going to be a little more refined today, use a cutter. Throughout my cigar journey, I've used every type of cutter. I've used punch, guillotine, V-cut, whatever, cross-cut, everything. I even used my knife the other day just to cut it all around because I didn't have a cutter, surprisingly. I have like 7,000 cutters and I didn't have one that day. But yeah, I always go back to a guillotine cutter. For me, it's the best. It's not as intrusive. It doesn't, especially with people that really like the V cutter. It looks cool for sure, but it damages the construction of the cigar. It goes pretty deep into the cap, and the cap is where your mouth goes. And so a lot of people tend to be, drooling, not drooling, but, produce a ton of saliva. It's going to break down that cap, and, at some point maybe it's going to be sagging, and it's going to be hard to hold in your mouth because, the cap's basically destroyed. But, like I said, I go with the guillotine cut. My favorite cutter has a back on it, so you make sure you don't go too far down on the cigar, but this one doesn't. This one's actually our own personal Chesterton cutter. It's got our logo, and it's a big ring gauge cigar. So for the guys that like big ring gauges, love this cutter. But when you cut, you don't want to cut too much. I would say, I don't know, probably about, a 1/16 of an inch? It's not that much that you're cutting off.
Yeah, and here, let me see here. So I'm not completely new. So
that's
one thing that I look for, let me see here if I can get it to focus. So one thing that I look for on these is I cut it where it doesn't quite have the dome. It'll focus. Yeah. So before the dome ends is where I cut. So about right at the top of my finger there is probably about where I'm going to go. So. All right. Cool.
Yeah. So next, is a pretty controversial kind of technique of lighting, just because some people, there's really kind of three ways to light a cigar. You either light it with matches, you light it with what's called a cedar spill, which is essentially just a stick of Spanish cedar that you light, and you light it with this, or with a torch. I prefer torch. I like the convenience of it. It's easy to do, plentiful. And so, I prefer a torch, but there's a bunch of different ways. What's kind of cool to know real quick about this has what's called a closed foot. So at the end of it, instead of it being open like most cigars, it actually has tobacco leaf covering the bottom. So you can actually light it like that. But what that intended to do is you're able to get that just wrapper taste. You're able to taste just the wrapper from the light, and it's kind of cool. You can kind of taste the transition once you start tasting the fillers and everything. So with lighting a cigar, what you want to do is what's called toasting it. So on a butane flame, you see there's kind of the blue area here. You don't want that touching the cigar. You're going to be able to feel where the heat kind of goes, and be careful when you do this, obviously. But I can kind of feel the heat right here, and it's really, really hot. So you want to hold that cigar as far away as you can to where it's still light. So you can see it's already kind of lighting here. But essentially, you want to light the edges of the cigar. And this is called toasting. So you're lighting the edges, kind of rotating it around, getting those dark, black edges. And then once that's kind of good to go, then you actually go for the light. So. And then you can kind of rotate as you're lighting. And then at the end, what I like to do is kind of stoke the flame so that the orange is all the way around on the tip of the cigar.
So while I'm trying to light mine here, what happens if you don't get your light perfectly right the first time?
Yeah, so if you don't get it right the first time, what can happen, especially if you don't toast the edges? Like I noticed this part of the edge isn't fully toasted. As if you don't get that toasted right away, what will happen is some parts will burn much quicker than the others. So this side will just stay up, and this will go down. What that's called is channeling, and nothing completely wrong with it. It just, one, looks funky, but also you're not getting 100% enjoyment out of the cigar because you're missing a third of the wrapper that's not being lit and being used. So.
And if we do get any cigar aficionados in here watching how I lit that. And, you can criticize me. I'm not an expert. He's the tobacconist. I'm just I'm just an amateur enthusiast. But how cool would that be if you got paid to smoke cigars?
That'd be an awesome job.
So.
Yeah.
think one of the owners kind of technically does.
That's true. Yeah.
So, well, cool. Okay, so so I guess like what are you picking up on this? Like, so you're smoking this. You've got a much more refined palate than I do. What's going through your head right now?
Yeah, so just off the light, tasting just the wrapper itself, I got a little bit of like a white pepper, but very much like a dry wheat. So I know a lot of people when they're smoking cigars, especially if you're newer, will be like, "Oh, I don't taste flavors. I don't think," it takes a while to develop that and thousands of sticks, to smoke to do that. But one thing that kind of helped me was when I'm smoking, trying to think of what reminds me of that flavor. So especially when I was starting out, it'd be like, "Oh, this reminds me of the time where I went to Seal Beach and had a cinnamon roll on the pier or whatever." Things like that. Even as ridiculous as it sounds, that's training your brain to start recognizing flavors. So that's kind of how I developed my taste within the past, 6 years, 7 years at this point. And able to start pick out flavors. So that's kind of what I'm tasting here is that little bit of white pepper, but like a dry wheat. And I've smoked this thing dozens of times, so I kind of know what the experience is going to be.
Right.
But when you're smoking, kind of the flavor checkpoints, I would say, in a cigar is one, that initial light, what you taste. But then in a cigar, you go by thirds. So I would say till about right here is the first third. And depending on who blends it, what company it's from, each third is going to have a different flavor profile. Like I was saying earlier, those older style Connecticut's tend to only be kind of one flavor profile throughout. And sure, guys like that, they like it, whatever. I'm not that type of person. I prefer a complex cigar that keeps my attention throughout the whole thing. I want it to change flavors. I want it to get better, different things that, makes my mind drawn to it. I don't want to be bored, throughout because that's the only thing I'm tasting. But yeah, so kind of the first third, second third, and then final third, obviously. It's kind of the checkpoints in a cigar once you're able to actually kind of taste flavors.
Cool. Okay. Well, so I guess like as far as like the technique thing, we've kind of covered everything. I think we'll cover one more thing. If you just take a look, we'll cover one more thing, maybe a little bit further down this. So, because you said channeling or canoeing or whatever you want to call it. We'll show how to fix that. But what's one of your favorite memories working in the cigar industry?
Ooh. Favorite memories working in the cigar industry? I would say one of the coolest is getting to meet Guy Fieri.
Did he take you to Flavortown?
His cigar definitely did.
Oh.
So this is at a trade show in Vegas that happens every year. Actually, next year will be in New Orleans. It'll be the first time they're changing cities. But last year it was in Vegas, and this year it's in Vegas. And the Guy Fieri released his own cigar line called Knuckle Sandwich. And it's made by Espinosa, so if you're in the industry, Espinosa is one of the best boutique brands you can get. But, it was the first day of the actual trade show, and there was a line forming. I was like, what's going on here? And so I just get in line, following like little sheep. But I get in line, and then all of a sudden I get to the front. I was like, oh my goodness, it's Guy Fieri and Eric Espinosa. And so I get called up, and they each hand me a cigar and talk to me a little bit about the cigar and what it's like. And I was like, this is awesome. And so I cut my cigar and lit it up with them. And man, it's a great cigar. The Habano for me is a little bit too peppery. It's what I call a pepper bomb. If you like pepper, like guys like Anthony Rosici, who is a big guy in our community that loves cigars. He loves peppery cigars. I don't. The Habano is very, very peppery, but the Maduro was fantastic. Very smooth, flavorful.
Yeah.
It was just incredible getting to meet him and Eric. Actually, I would say my favorite memory within the industry working in it was also at that trade show. There's a company called Foundation Cigars, and for myself personally, one of my favorite companies as well. Their owner is Nick Melillo, who previously, before he started his company Foundation, was at Drew Estate. Drew Estate's one of the biggest cigar companies in the world right now. They're renowned for their acid cigars. You've probably heard of those, but also their high end is called Liga Privada, and those can be anywhere from $20 to hundreds of dollars, just depending on what year the cigar is, what blend, whatever.
Yeah.
He was the guy behind all those Ligas. He was the guy that went to Nicaragua, lived in Nicaragua for like 12 years, finding rare leaves. He's known, his nickname is the King of Broadleaf, because he really found kind of the best Connecticut broadleaf in the industry, and was fantastic at figuring out how to blend with it. But then Drew Estate got bought out in 2014 by Swisher Sweets, the gas station blunt cigar and company. And so he was like, hey, I'm gone. I don't want to be a part of this giant corporation anymore. I don't see the vision. So he left and started his own cigar company, Foundation. And his first cigar that he made and came out with is called the El Huehuense. So it's a name for a Nicaraguan cultural dance, and the English translation is the wise man. But it's made by Aganorsa in Aganorsa's factory with Aganorsa's tobacco for Nick. Nick had a big hand in blending it, but they made it for him, and it's under his name, which is super cool.
Real quick, so the final technical thing. So I didn't get as good as light as you did. So you can probably see it on the screen here. You can see how right there the tobacco goes way up. So okay, how do we fix this?
So same kind of thing as toasting. What you're gonna do, get a light, hold it as far away as you can, and just kind of rotate it a little bit down to where you can get an even burn line.
And what's this process called?
This is called not toasting. I can't think of it.
Touch up.
Touch up. Yeah.
I was trying to make you look like the expert here. So, oh well, I tried.
It's early.
It's early. No, what are you talking about? This is live, premiering at 7 p.m. No. So pre-recorded, obviously. We had to do this before the shop opens because we weren't going to come here late at night to do this.
No.
So
yeah, guitars playing and people being loud, having fun. So.
Yeah, actually, why don't we talk about that a little bit of the culture of the cigar lounge in general, and then the cigar lounge here at Chesterton's.
Yeah, I mean, in general, the cigar industry and the cigar lounge is very unique within today's, atmosphere. It's really a place where men, especially, can get together, have something that connects them at a base level, which for us is the cigar or the pipe or whatever you're smoking. Well, hopefully it's just those two that you're smoking. But yeah, and in a lounge especially, the cigar connects everybody. And so it provides kind of a base level where, if a conversation ends up in politics or religion or some other kind of touchy subject within today's world, you're able, to come back to the cigar. That at a base level, you like the other person just because they like cigars. They're with you. They have that kind of camaraderie. And, we have a pretty, there's a lot of Catholics here just because of the shop itself in Steubenville and our kind of area. But we do have people that are Protestants. We have, people that don't have any faith at all, whatever. But what would bring us together is the cigar.
Yeah.
And
There's a wonderful old man. I don't know if he'd appreciate me saying his name, but he's a Baptist minister that comes in here.
One of my favorite people.
Wonderful, wonderful man.
Yeah.
It's so cool because had this place not been here, I would have never met him.
Yeah.
Under no circumstances would our paths really have ever crossed, but they regularly cross here. Yeah. And it's just so cool. I really like that. So, okay. So I'm not going to spin the camera around because I've worked so hard to get this somewhat decent angle. But so what about all the TVs in here? What's going on with that?
Yeah. So our lounge is pretty unique in that we don't have TVs. Excuse me. It was a very intentional decision that we made. We discussed it prior to opening the shop, and it was a conscious decision that, hey, we want this lounge to be driven to conversation. We don't want it to be distracted by, the Steelers losing to whoever. That
Which
tends
happens often.
Exactly.
So.
Or, if Nikki Haley and Trump are going at it, we don't want to be distracted, as fun as that, is to see.
I mean, those topics do come up.
They do come up, yeah, for sure.
But we don't have it being forced upon forced down our throats. Instead, we just get a blonde boy who walks in here amazing, occasionally. So.
And, one of our first actual rep that we had for the company, Josh from Oliva, when he first came into the lounge, that was one of the first things he said. He goes, "You don't know how many times I've seen people fight over what's on the TV, whether because of the content of the TV or just because they're being belligerent and being rude, whatever. But the TVs don't provide a way to have conversation. It's a way to distract yourself, pull yourself away from your fellow person,
right,
and not be within the community." He's like, I had another cigar shop owner who literally tore his TV off his wall and threw it in the dumpster because two guys were fighting over wanting to watch one sports game versus the other. And it's like, it's destroying the lounge. There's,
I mean, that's what I do if my kids are fighting, like, over a screen, I take it away.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you're going to act like a child, you're going to get treated like a child. So,
exactly.
I'm for that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And we have such a unique and awesome community. Routinely, it'll be 10, 15 guys sitting in a circle, moving the furniture around and wanting to intentionally hang out with each other. And really, outside of a cigar lounge, you're not finding really many places where guys get to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And we do have female members. We have a couple female members that come in and, they're very much appreciated. But like I was saying, this is really an outlet for men.
Yeah, I was about to say, whenever the female members, once again, like, they're welcome.
Yeah.
But when they are in the room, the dynamic certainly changes.
Yeah.
I don't want to say, like, it gets worse, but it is different.
It is different.
In some ways, it arguably might be better because typically we watch our mouths a little bit more, which is a good thing, I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what are some of the coolest things that you've seen happen in the lounge?
Oh, man. Coolest things. I would say just kind of the spontaneous singing that we routinely do. There's been a guitar that kind of resides in our lounge that people routinely pull out, and one of the owners plays the accordion, and he has it, set up over here. And so...
Oh, I'm going to have that rolling as B-roll.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And routinely, people pull out the guitar, the owner will pull out the accordion, and just start singing folk tunes.
Irish music,
everything. And that's always the most fun in community bringing. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a great voice. If you know the words to the song, you sing it as loud as you can.
Yeah. Now, so I did this intentionally. So once you show people your ash here versus mine. So I just knocked off the ash there. He's barely touched his.
Yeah.
Mine's also looking like a pencil right now. So do you want to explain a little bit of the science behind that and what's going on there?
Yeah, so that's called coning. What's happening basically is Kyle's smoking it pretty quickly. And so the outside edges are burning quicker than the actual inside the middle of the cigar. And, kind of the drawbacks of smoking too quickly is that, one, you'll burn the tobacco and it'll give it a different kind of tarry flavor. It's not great, a little more bitter. But also that happens.
Yeah, my mouth is super oily right now.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm not a fan of it. So if you knock your ash off and you see that you're coning there, that's a sign to slow down.
Yep.
So that was intentional, and I'm gonna say that until it's believable. But yeah, so that's a thing to look out for. But I don't know if y'all saw the ash that I just knocked off, but it was like a little over double what Matt has right there.
Yeah.
So, well, cool. So, I don't know. So the spontaneity is really cool. And I guess just being in Steubenville, the amount of interesting people that just walk through the door. Yeah. We've got a guy here who does theology work and is also a lawyer on the side.
Yeah.
He's so freaking interesting.
He is.
And he'll just give a perspective on something, and it's just like, wow, I never thought of that. However, everything you just said makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And he's a pretty normal guy. I'll actually have him on the channel later. He's publishing a book, which is really cool.
Yep.
So keep an eye out for that interview. But yeah. So let's talk about pet peeves.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Pet peeves within the industry. There's a lot of them. Personally, my biggest pet peeve, especially being, a general manager of a shop, is people going into the humidor, picking up a cigar, running it under their nose, sniffing it, especially if it doesn't have cellophane. Running under the cigar, sniffing it, whatever, putting the bottom, touching the nose. That irritates me so much.
Why does it irritate you?
One, sniffing the cigar is not going to tell you anything about what it tastes. They do smell very good. I love the smell of an unlit cigar, and that's a part of the taste testing. Once you get it to, once you're ready to light it, though, in a lounge or in a cigar shop, if you're sniffing that and you don't buy it, the next person, it's going to be a cigar that's been ran under somebody else's nose. These typically are not in cellophane. And, if Kyle came in and grabbed a bunch of these and just shoved it up his nose, it's like, well, I don't want to.
You want to smoke
that.
my boogers?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And even keeping in mind with what happened during the past 4 years, cough, cough, whatever.
The demonetized disease.
Yeah, exactly. The Mexican light lager.
Yes. Great with lime.
Yeah, great with lime. Just keeping in mind that you don't want things under people's noses. And like I said, it doesn't provide you any information on how it's going to taste.
But Matt, if I want to know how it's going to taste, what should I do?
Yeah, if you want to know how it's going to taste, ask the person that sells it. That's their job. They're supposed to, know what the flavor profile is, what to match it with, what you're drinking. I'm a cigar and coffee guy. I drink whiskey from time to time, but I'm not much of a alcohol drinker.
Wait, aren't you Irish?
I am Irish. Yeah.
You can tell by his complexion.
Yeah, I'm the most Mexican-looking Irishman you'll ever see.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
So, okay, any other pet peeves? I mean, etiquette,
Yeah.
I suppose, in the lounge.
Yeah, etiquette in the lounge. So, I would say when you're putting out your cigar in a lounge, or with just in general other people, what I see a lot of new smokers, or people especially that have come from cigarettes, they'll stamp it out in the ashtray. One thing to keep in mind with cigars, these are a handmade product, and kind of the phrase is the cigar you're smoking has been touched by 300 people basically from start to finish, from the seedling that goes into the tray, to the guy that transplanted it to the property, the guy that waters it, the guy that harvests it, plucks it, whatever, rolls your cigar. About 200 pairs of hands touch basically every part of the cigar. And so when we put our cigars, we just leave it in the ashtray, let the flame die out, and then throw it out. Because, the idea with that is you want to let it die with dignity, because a lot of those people who took the time to make the cigar, if you're just stamping it out, rubbing it, it's kind of, I don't want to say disrespectful, but, it's not appreciative of the craft that these people put their hard-earned time into it.
Wow, I am one of those guys. I did not know that until this moment. Okay, good to know. Now, another piece of etiquette. So one time I was back here by myself, and I pulled out one of those, the tobacconist handbook or whatever, and it talked about labels. I've seen some people, I think it's a new guy thing, the first thing they'll do is they'll cut their cigar, they'll light it, and they'll rip off the label. Yeah,
so that really, once again, is kind of the older generation, newer generation etiquette thing. So the older generation, I tend to notice, likes to take off their bands on their cigars, which is completely fine. The kind of idea behind that is, you're smoking a cigar, you don't want other people to know what you're smoking. Everybody's kind of equal. You know, one guy could be smoking a $150 cigar, the next guy could be smoking a $5 cigar. And the kind of idea is you don't want to kind of degrade the person that's smoking a cheap cigar. So I definitely understand it. Personally, I like to keep my bands on, you know, as long as I can. One, there's certain companies especially that tend to over glue their bands on, and that sticks to the actual wrapper of the cigar sometimes. And if you're peeling it off, there's a good chance you'll peel off some of the wrapper, which is not great. So I personally like, one, I appreciate the artwork that a lot of these companies put into it, and it looks really nice. Also provides you a nice place to kind of hold it. Yeah, and you know, kind of the idea behind the invention of the band was Queen Isabella. What they would do was tie ribbon around the band, or around the cigar, so that would be a place for her to hold it, so she wouldn't technically get like cigar scent on her hands. Obviously, it's going to happen with the smoke, but whatever. Kind of the idea, like I said, behind it was Queen Isabella would wrap ribbon around it and would hold it on that ribbon.
Queen Isabella smoked cigars?
She did.
Yeah. Okay, what? You're blowing my mind right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, smoking tobacco has been around for a couple millennia. Native Americans, you know, one of my personal favorite cigars is called the Olmec. And it's by Foundation Cigars. But the Olmec were a group of, you know, old world Native American tribe that were throughout Mexico, Central, and, you know, South America. And those people were kind of known as the first people to smoke tobacco, where they would roll it up and smoke it. But when the Spanish came in, you know, the late 1400s and went to Cuba, they took the tobacco and actually rolled it up and started smoking what we know as cigars today. So really kind of the first known actual production of a cigar that we know today was 1519. So over 500 years ago was kind of the first known actual cigar. And most of the tobacco grown in Cuba was sent to Spain. So all of, you know, cigar production was in Spain for the longest time. You know, it was just, for the longest time, it was just a leaf being transported, which was kind of interesting. But yeah, in Spain especially, it was huge in the cigar industry, and Queen Isabella loved cigars.
Interesting. Yeah, because it's, you know, this is normally associated with like a very masculine thing. So to find out that the staple for, you know, cigars, virtually all of them that you get these days are going to have a band on them, came from the Queen of Spain. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the take on the bands that guy had on, and I assume it was an older guy who wrote it. He said that, you know, pulling the band off of the cigar was akin to ripping the artist's signature off of a painting. It was just like, no, and kind of like you said, like so many people worked on this. Let them have their signature on it for as long as, you know, whatever. Now, occasionally, you get a good cigar that you just want to finish it off. You know, what's the solution to that?
Yeah. So, especially when you get down to that final third, it can be very hot to hold. So, this is where I kind of learned it. I went to Franciscan University, and I was on men's ministry, and we worked closely with Father Don Frisco, who's a friar on campus, and he kind of taught me a lot of how I learned how to smoke. He also gave me a ton of cigars. Anyways, one of the first things he told me, he brought out a little corncob pipe. And as he was finishing it, it was getting too hot to hold. So what he did is he shoved the butt end of the cigar into his corncob pipe and smoked the rest of the cigar out of the pipe. So that, you know, obviously stuck with me. And it's a fun way, you know, to smoke a cigar. One, you're also going to get kind of different flavors of it. You know, your mouth, when you're smoking it, you're touching the actual tobacco leaf. So you're tasting the flavors of the tobacco leaf through there. But when you're smoking through the pipe, you're not getting those flavors. You're just getting what's being burned. Yeah. So it's an interesting thing.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So, okay, so Cuban cigars were basically the original. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, cool.
Cuban tobacco, Spanish made were the first.
So, I guess, how familiar are you with the history of cigars in the U.S.? How'd that start?
Yeah. So in the U.S., it's kind of intertwined just with, the islands, Cuba, Dominican Republic, things like that. With Miami being so close to Cuba, a lot of immigrants, especially in the mid to late 1800s, moved from Cuba to Miami. Miami and then Tampa especially. Tampa, at one point, there's a portion in Tampa called Ybor City, which is historically one of the oldest kind of cigar towns in the industry. And at one point, there were over 400 cigar factories. It might be more. Number might be off on that. But from what I remember, it was over 400 factories just in that Ybor City area. And, it was mostly Cuban immigrants. And so they would come over, bring over tobacco, roll cigars, and it was huge. It was huge in that area. But also, there's a kind of influence with the Amish, too. If you've heard the word stogie, reference to a cigar, that comes from the Amish.
Really?
Yeah. So it's referred to as like a rough, rolled-up cigar is what it translates to, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Because I always assume, when you say stogie, I always think like the big, fat ones,
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's like a Pennsylvania Dutch word.
Pennsylvania Dutch word. Yeah, so it's typically Pennsylvania tobacco. And yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So are there any Amish-made cigars?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They're
Like-
not great.
They're not. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, I've never seen them. It's like, yeah,
There's a reason.
because we're not going to carry them.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, they tend to be on the cheaper end. You can find a couple that are gas station cigars. They tend to be not sun-grown, but fire cured. So they're going to be that campfire, smoky, very pungent style.
Gotcha.
Not my personal favorite for a cigar at all, but some people like them.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I guess here's the I was going to say the $1 million question, more like the $15 question. Are Cubans the best cigars?
No.
Why not?
Modern day, no, they are not. And you kind of got to think about it in terms of what has Cuba done to their country. Everything's been nationalized. The Cuban government owns every part of the production. Everything made in Cuba is under Tobacco's SA, Habano's SA. So you'll see that in all their packaging. But it's a government-owned entity that runs all the production, all the growing of the tobacco, everything. They're not crop rotating, so their soils are just degrading. Especially the quality control is not there. You'll get a full box of like Cohiba Behekis or whatever, which are about an $80 cigar at some places. You buy a full box, 6 out of 10 of those are not going to be constructed very well. They're either going to have tight draws, or they're going to have soft spots in the cigars. The bands are wonky. It's really not great. And because of the notoriety, they're some of the most fake cigars. And, that's a big part of taking the risk. They're still illegal, so you can't bring them into the country. But the people that do, especially if you're an American that wants Cubans, it's not a good option, to be honest. Personally, I'm not a fan of the Cuban style. I've probably smoked about 3 dozen different types of Cubans. I've only really, really liked about 2 or 3 of them. Ironically, one of them was a Cuban that Kyle had given me.
While we were out of the country,
Yes.
in Minecraft,
We were in Minecraft in Mexico.
Yeah. Which was funny though, because that cigar that I'd picked up, the guy, he was asking me, he's like, "How often do you smoke? How long do you want to smoke?" Those are the 2 questions that I have for you. And I was like, well, I smoke, maybe about once a month, and the other people, this is for a party, those people might smoke maybe 3 or 4 times a year. So he's like, okay, so those people don't smoke at all. Good to know. Well, so it was the ones that he said that the non-smokers will enjoy these. You said it's like, that's one of the best ones I've ever had.
Favorite ones
it was just like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real quick. So I'm about ready to ash my cigar. And it's different for every type of cigar, especially from different country to country. Honduran tobacco tends to flake a lot, so you'll have to ash it more frequently. Dominican tends to be very uniform and strong, so you'll hold an ash forever with a lot of Dominican cigars. But this is Nicaragua made, and this is about this point where I feel comfortable with ashing it. I don't want it to fall over myself. So when you ash a cigar, what you want to do is just take it and basically lightly push it off, and it'll break off like that, and it'll just sit there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
you got some slight coning that's going on there.
Yeah, a
but
little bit. But honestly, when you ash, that's completely fine. Yeah, at that kind of level.
Okay. Well, cool. So I guess you and I both know somebody that gets a lot of criticism for smoking cigars, and there's a possibility that I'm going to get some criticism down here, which I love because it just fuels the algorithm and it helps promote the video, and those people aren't going to make it into this. So I just want you all to know that if you leave a critical comment, I'm farming you for
engagement.
For engagement, exactly. So thank you for your service. But anyway, so as Catholics, like, are we allowed to smoke? Are we, like, what's going on here?
Oh, yeah, we're definitely allowed to smoke.
So what's some of the morality behind that?
Man, really, it's seen as something like sugar, I don't really know canonically the morality behind it. But
not a theologian, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a theologian at all. Even though I went to Franciscan, Most people think they're theologians because they went to Franciscan. I do not. Anyways, yeah, kind of think about it like sugar. It's all within moderation. If you have too much sugar, develop diabetes, things like that, that'll kill you. Same with cigars. If you're smoking 10 cigars a day, obviously you're going to probably, more than likely, develop something, a cancer, whatever, that will kill you. There was a study done that finished it, excuse me, back in 2016 that the FDA did over a course of like 50, 60 years. And what they concluded, which is kind of weird that they would actually admit this, but what was concluded was that men who smoked 1 to 2 cigars a day or less had a 0% increased risk of developing cancers associated with smoking tobacco. A lot of that is due to, cigars that you don't actually inhale like cigarettes. The tobaccos aren't filled with different, chemicals. It's just one ingredient. It's just tobacco leaf. That's all it is. And so, a 1 to 2 cigar a day increased risk, 0% increased risk to me personally is perfect. For me, a cigar is, one, it can be very meditative. You're trying to regulate your breathing, essentially. You don't want to burn it too hot to get a huge cone. But also, a lot of times I'll just sit there, take a deep breath, puff on the cigar and then release it, take a long time to release. And it is very meditative, but also it reduces stress levels. Stress is the number one killer of men. Developing heart disease, things like that, it sucks, for men especially. And if there's a way where I can reduce stress and have, a great time with friends and family, develop friendships and bonds, be a part of my community, things like that, I'll take the 0% increased risk,
Yeah. Well, and let's even say it's a slight increase in risk. Let's say, let's say it's non-zero, whatever. My response to that is the point of life isn't to live as long as possible. If I live to the age of 100 and I'm miserable all the way through, and I don't connect with my fellow men and whatnot, that doesn't sound appealing to me.
Yeah.
I'd rather die somewhere between 60 and 70 of cancer,
Now, don't be reckless and, try to develop it. But,
right. But, it's just like the value that's added from this cigar culture in my life, if it shaves off a few years at the end, I was never getting out of here alive in the first place.
None of us are, yeah.
So, it's just okay, yeah.
Yep.
So, Anyway, that's I find it's mostly women
Yeah.
who have a problem with it. Which, to be fair, like my wife doesn't like the smell. I think your wife has probably gotten used to it by now.
She's gotten used to the smell for sure. You know, I don't smoke cigars in the house. Pipes are a different story, but cigars I definitely don't smoke in the house.
Yeah. Well, cool. So, what are some of the cool things that are going on here at Chesterton's? What can you publicly tell?
Yeah. So a couple of things in kind of the immediate future. A couple of events that we're having. At the end of the month, we're having a cigar pairing night. So one of our, I've mentioned them a couple times, but Aganorsa, as a shop, our kind of community favorite company is Aganorsa. It's our best sellers by far. Also, their rep, Kunal, is a huge part of our community, but also our guys love him. So knowledgeable, great teacher about the industry and things like that. So he'll be coming out, actually, on Leap Day and basically teaching us how to pair cigars with certain types of drinks.
You keep going.
So, one, it's kind of teach you how to taste different flavor notes. Kind of as I was mentioning, kind of trying to develop your palate. But also, trying to pair it with a cigar, with a coffee versus a cigar with a whiskey or a bourbon. So yeah, that's kind of our next event. After that, in March 15th, so the Ides of March, we're having an arm wrestling tournament.
Oh.
Which is going to be a lot of fun. There's a lot of guys here that are huge into arm wrestling. We have a professional table and everything like that.
The dress code on that.
The dress code, yeah. So we kind of wanted to do, the classic bare knuckle boxing kind of picturesque style to it. So for the participants, they're required to wear a dress shirt, button-down dress shirt, slacks, and nice shoes.
Yeah, as I understood, it was like attire is black tie.
Essentially, yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was interesting. Yeah. Now, okay, so I just got up and you saw what I was grabbing, but this is the first thing that I've consumed all day. I haven't had any breakfast or anything like that. I'm starting to feel a little woozy, a little lightheaded. What's going on?
Yeah. So what happens when you start feeling sick with cigars? Essentially, the nicotine tricks your system into thinking that you're getting, you have a sugar high. So it dumps all your glucose in your body. And so you start developing kind of that nauseous, sick feeling because you have no sugar in your body. So kind of what we recommend, and just in general, is a quick dose of sugar. So that's a Werther's Original candy. But, a lot of people like to have kind of a sugary drink when they smoke. A lot of guys will have like a Coke or something. I have a coffee with a little bit of sweetened creamer in it. Something just to kind of keep your sugar levels up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And just right there, I already feel better.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost instantaneous.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I know some guys that will keep sugar packets in their pocket. Just a quick dump and take a shot of sugar.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So Cubans, you think are subpar as far as the industry goes. Who makes the best cigars?
Oh, as far as country? Nicaragua, for sure.
What makes Nicaragua special?
There's kind of three main growing regions in Nicaragua. It's Condega, Esteli, and Jalapa are kind of the three regions. Even within the country, those three regions, each of their leaves that they can grow have very different properties. And it's really cool to kind of taste the differences between them. One of the events that Aganorsa likes to put on is called a Fuma event. And so essentially what that is kind of a dive into the ideas of blending a cigar. And so what they do is they take individual leaves that they use in their cigar blends and roll them up into like a little, I guess you would call it like a cigarillo. They're actually called Fumas. But they roll them up, and so what they do is have you taste each individual part of the blend in a specific leaf. So they'll have a Corojo 98 individually, and you smoke that. And then they'll have like a Criollo 99, which is another varietal. The Corojo is from Jalapa, while the Criollo is from Esteli. And then you kind of taste they bring usually 3 or 4 different types, but you taste those individually. And then you start mixing and matching and tasting those, and it's super fun just to try the different blends out of those leaves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So Nicaragua, you would say, is the best.
Yeah.
Whenever you were saying the regions, like, oh, when you said the Esteli, I was just like, oh, I've seen that before, so I just checked this one.
Yep.
So these came from the Jalapa Valley.
Yep.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So Agrinorsa is kind of known for their main core blend, which is Criollo 99 from Jalapa and Corojo 98 from Esteli. It's kind of their core that they kind of put into every single blend. And then they kind of mix and match with ratios and things like that. But those two are typically always in an Agrinorsa cigar.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I just remembered that I promised to do this. I meant to do it at the beginning, but I totally forgot. So there's another YouTube channel. He's Catholic, and he is actually kind of like centered around cigars. He calls it Holy Smokes. And so Dustin Quick, I'm sorry for encroaching on your territory, but I can't wait to have you on the show soon, or me on yours, whatever. Even better, you could drive down from Canada, come visit, and you could sit where Matt's sitting, or I could sit where Matt's sitting, whatever, and we could do this in person. Anyway, so, all right, cool. So, what about the Dominican Republic? You mentioned a little bit like their construction's different. Like, is that a cultural thing or is that a leaf thing?
That's typically a leaf thing.
Okay.
On the properties that produces the ashes, you'll notice it too, especially on something like Arturo Fuente. Their cigars, their ashes tend to be very compact and white, like almost strikingly white ash. Whereas this is definitely like a gray. Honduran tends to be like almost like not black, but very, very dark gray, and you'll notice it. But a lot of Dominican tobacco tends to be very white, and it's very interesting.
I've heard that like the Dominican Republic has similar, like an almost identical climate to Cuba, so that's what makes them popular.
Yeah,
but they're still not the same because it's the difference in soil, right?
The soil difference, yeah. There's a big volcanic region that is primarily the difference, but Dominican cigars are great too. I would say that's probably my second favorite region for just cigars in general, and the factories that are there. Those are great. I like Dominican. I'm not to say I would say Nicaragua is still my favorite just because majority of the tobacco is fantastic. Whereas Dominican, there's some that I'll take or leave in terms of like factory and what people produce there. But so like we actually roll our own cigars right now just for fun, just to kind of taste and things like that. We'll have rolling events. So we do roll our own cigars. But one of the main fillers that we use for the cigar is Dominican Piloto, which used to be a Cuban seed, Piloto seed, but taken from Cuba and grown in the Dominican. And personally, from what I've tried for fillers, it has a great combustion, it produces a lot of smoke, but the flavoring that comes out of it's fantastic. So I really like it. Okay. But yeah, it's really all about just trying different leaves from different places. And in Dominican Republic, what's interesting about it is they have they have a ton of microclimates, is what they're called. So even within like a field of, say you have, I'll just use Arturo Fuente, like an Arturo Fuente field. They'll have different plots. Some will get more water, some will get more clouds, some will get, whatever, more wind. Even that will produce, even if it's the same seed varietal, will produce something different in each of those plots. So it's very interesting. And it's hard. There's kind of a couple different approaches people have to the industry. Like if you have, say you get more water one year and your tobacco tastes different from the year before, do you just stop making that cigar, or do you try to buy tobacco that tastes the same, or do you change the blend? If you keep using this tobacco, it's going to taste different. Do you just own that and just say, yeah, our cigars are going to taste different, we had a different yield this year? Or do you change the blend to make it taste the same? What do you do? And that's kind of a big thing with the blending industry. And, it's 100% handmade. It's always going to be different from year to year.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe they've made it an hour into this video, and they realized, man, this all sounds good to me. How do I get started? So, and chances are there's somebody that they're not even going to know. They're not even going to know, like, local cigar shop, or, you know, I guess, how does the viewer go from never having smoked a cigar before, very interested, wanting to try it?
Yeah.
How do they get started without breaking the bank?
Yeah. So I would say for starting cigars, you know, there's a couple different routes you can take to getting your first cigar. There's two kind of main. There's flavored and infused, which will be like your acids, things like that, where they'll be infused with like a sugar water, so they'll be taste, you know, very sweet. They'll have a sweetened tip. You know, they'll rub sugar around the cap. It'll be very sweet, very flavorful. Or you can go into traditional, something like this, where it's not sweet and not flavored in any sense. My kind of advice would be to kind of stay away from this flavored and infused stuff to start out. You know, those are a fun part. I mean, that's how I started. I started with flavored and infused. But if I could do it all over again, I wouldn't. You know, I wouldn't go to the flavored and infused stuff. Not to say that those are bad, but...
Friends don't let friends smoke flavored.
Yeah.
I say they're bad. No.
Yeah, you know, and they're not bad, and people that enjoy them, enjoy them.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, if you're enjoying it, who cares what I think?
Yeah.
So,
you know, it's like drinking, you know, a Starbucks Frappuccino versus a traditional coffee with no cream, with just milk, cream, and sugar. You know.
right. You know, what do you actually enjoy?
Yeah, exactly. And so, I would say get into a traditional cigar first and try to enjoy it. For your first cigar, find a Connecticut shade. You know, if you go to a cigar shop and you talk to your tobacconist, let them know, like, hey, I'm new to cigars. You know, I don't really have a tolerance for super heavy. I need something nice and light. And they'll, you know, typically recommend a Connecticut shade, but if they don't, let them know you want a Connecticut shade. Like I said, if you can find these, especially JFR Connecticut's, these are our best-selling cigar in the whole humidor. One, because of the price point at $7.50.
Right.
But because of the high-quality tobacco that's in it and the flavors that are produced out of it. And there's nothing better. I really can say at that price point, you cannot beat this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, I'm big into watches. And, you know, so when you get into the mechanical watches, you can get into a mechanical watch for as little as like $100 up. You know, the most expensive watch that I've ever seen is like, well, it was a one-off, and it was like it went on auction for like $20 million, something like that. Wow. Insane. But I was reading a list, and it was talking about the best watch for the price point, and they were talking about those $10 Casio watches. And he's like, for the price point, they reign supreme. And like, this was a guy who's like reviewed like $1 million watches, and he was just like, for $10, you would have to probably get a $60 competitor that does the same thing as well as this one does. And it was like $10 Casio, and he went through like all the points that's talking about like why it was a good $10 watch. So for this one, it's for $750. Like, I have no complaints about this. This is really nice.
And that's kind of the approach also we take within our humidor. We would rather you smoke an amazing $7 to $10 cigar than, you know, swindle you into purchasing a $20 cigar that's not so great. Right. That's kind of one way to test your tobacconist. If you know cigars a little bit, find a cigar that you know is fantastic, good quality, whatever. And if they try to get you to buy that $30 stick that you know is not great, but just has the hype behind it, you know, that's kind of a way to test them. Yeah. I'd rather, say if somebody comes in saying like, I have $30 to spend, what would you recommend? I'd rather them, you know, buy 3 $10 cigars than one $30 cigar. Yeah. If I know they're going to enjoy it. I don't feel comfortable naming it, but I'm pointing right at it. Everybody, and if somebody's local watching this, they know which one I'm talking about. There's a $45 cigar in the humidor, and don't get me wrong, it's not a bad cigar. It's a fantastic cigar. It's a really, really good cigar. For $45, it's awful. I wouldn't say it's awful. I would say it's kind of. as someone that sells it, it's hard to say that it's awful, but it's a fantastic cigar. For $45, it's...
You could get more bang for your buck elsewhere.
For sure. Yeah, you can get more bang for your buck at a cheaper price point. But one, kind of the story behind that cigar, I won't name it, but the story behind the cigar and what the proceeds go to is really awesome. The company that makes it is fantastic. But also, it's great for a gift.
Yes.
Because somebody that won't buy it for themselves, but if they, are gifted it, it's an amazing cigar.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was going to say. Like, for free, as a free cigar,
yeah,
outstanding. It's going to be probably the best cigar you're going to have all year.
Yeah.
But for $45, it's one of those like, I got what I paid for. Like you're correct. Awful was the wrong word. But it's just like, this is about what I would expect. Maybe a little less than what I would expect, but one guy that hangs out here often, I gave one to him, and he loves these JFRs, and I gave him one of those things, and he was just like, "This is a kingly gift," and everybody who walked in, he's like, "Do you see this? Kyle gave this to me. It's a kingly gift," and I was just like, "Whoa, bro, it's okay. It's just a cigar," but anyway, yeah. So that's. Yeah, I would say like $45 for yourself, $45 for somebody else, though. Okay, all right.
Yeah, I mean, we went through 4 boxes of them during Christmas time. Like I said, it's a great gift for somebody else for sure.
Yeah. Well, somebody who does smoke cigars, because if they don't smoke cigars, you might kill them.
It might kill them. It might get lost on them.
But yeah. So okay. So as we're going out into the world, and we're checking out all these tobacco shops or whatever, what are some of the cigars that you think people should keep an eye out for?
Yeah, I would say kind of the companies in general to look out for. Just going off the top, Tatuaje, they're a boutique company made primarily by my father.
Okay.
They have a good connection with each other. My father's a good one too. They're pretty widely available, but if you're looking for stuff to find, Tatuaje is a good one. I would say Roma Craft. They're another great boutique company based out of Austin. They have some incredible stuff at great price points too. Their Intemperance line, it's like $6 to $10 for everything, and they're all incredible. My favorite is called the Volstead, and it's a hybrid Sumatra wrapper. I think it's grown in Ecuador. It's fantastic. So Tatuaje, Roma Craft, Aganorsa for sure, especially if you find their old label stuff. So I would say, I think it was back in 2017, 2018, they rebranded. They used to be known as Casa Fernandez. But in the industry, there's another guy, Fernandez, AJ Fernandez, who's probably one of the most well-known tobacco growers in the industry, at least in the non-Cuban world. And so Casa Fernandez and AJ Fernandez, they're based out of the same city in Nicaragua, so a lot of people were getting mixed up. I'm like, whoa, is this AJ Fernandez? Who is this? And so 2017, 2018, they rebranded to Aganorsa Leaf. So if you find that old Casa Fernandez stuff, it's fantastic. It's been aged for the most part. If you can find that old Casa Fernandez. But Aganorsa in general, my personal favorite company of all time is Warped. Kyle Gellis is the owner and master blender. A majority of their cigars come from Aganorsa, are made at Aganorsa's factory with Aganorsa tobacco, but he blends it. Actually, there's an Aganorsa line called Guardian of the Farm, and the original blend was a collaboration between Kyle Gellis and Aganorsa, but it's an Aganorsa line. Kind of confusing, but for me, any really Aganorsa production cigar is incredible. As you can tell, I love them. Another company that, again, a majority of their stuff is Aganorsa production, HVC, Havana City. Fantastic stuff. What else? Crowned Heads is a great Dominican company. A lot of their stuff's made at EP Carrillo's factory. EP Carrillo is another great company. Let's see. What else? I'm trying to think of what's in the humidor here. Foundation, another great company that I love.
Now,
Dapper.
Oh yeah,
A
Dapper.
company we partnered with recently. I met the owner, Ian Reith, at
He's a cool
the
guy.
trade show. He's an awesome guy.
Yeah. Yeah, he was just here in the shop just
He was.
a few
Yeah,
months
he was
ago.
in December.
Yeah.
No, September.
No, it was after
Was
I
it
moved.
December?
I was here, so it was
Okay, so
after
I guess it was
November.
December.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ian Reith, awesome guy. Met him at the trade show back in July, and our rep Kunal, who reps Aganorsa, became a broker and repped Dapper, and so we were able to partner with him, get him in the shop, and we had an event with them and got to meet him. Well, I've already met him, but brought him into the shop for everybody to meet, and
Which, by the way, Dustin Quick, the Dapper makes the Holy Smokes cigars.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the Holy Smokes Bible Club, he makes their cigar for them.
yeah.
Which is really cool. His cigars are incredible. A lot of his stuff's made by the Oliva family, which is different from Oliva cigars, by the way. Oliva family at Naxa factory makes a majority of their stuff, and
Where's
those
that
are all Nicaragua.
Nicaragua. Okay.
Yeah, I believe.
Okay. That's fine.
I should
Whatever.
know. Yeah.
If you're wrong, somebody will correct you in the
somebody will
comments.
correct me. Yeah.
But okay, so
I should know that. I would assume it's Nicaragua just because of the N, Naxa. They're usually acronyms for something.
yeah.
So I'm pretty sure it's Nicaragua.
Okay. Well, cool. So now, what is your cigar that's currently on the shelf somewhere that's like your holy grail cigar?
Oh man.
Currently on the shelf.
Currently on the shelf?
Yeah.
My Holy Grail and currently on the shelf are kind of two different things for me.
Okay.
Holy Grail for me is like, if you find it, you have to buy it, and it's super hard to find. That's what Holy Grail is for me.
Okay.
But for everyday smoke that I can find that we have on our shelf, it's called the Maestro del Tiempo by
Oh,
Aganorsa.
that's a good one.
By Warped, sorry, but made by Aganorsa. It's one of my favorites. There's kind of two sizes, but the one we have that we keep in stock here is called the 5202, which is basically like a short Lancero. It's a 6 by 38 ring gauge, 6.5 by 38 ring gauge, which is one of my personal favorite sizes. And it's such an incredible smoke, super smooth, super flavorful.
Yep.
Very almondy. It's like a creamy almond.
Yeah.
Is how I describe it. Yeah, with a little bit of vanilla. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's see here. We got about half an hour before the shop has to open, even though we're live.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's going to believe that. Yeah, let me see here. Trying to think of anything else. So, okay, I guess what is your Holy Grail cigar?
My Holy Grail cigar would be a Jamaican production Macanudo.
Okay.
So they used to be produced in Jamaica with a very special tobacco called cow tongue. And it's a Jamaican tobacco leaf that is very long and skinny. And, it was made back in the 90s, and then they got bought out, and they started being made elsewhere. But that'd be my Holy Grail that would probably be almost impossible to find, to be honest. But an attainable Holy Grail, I would say... It'd have to be something aged.
Acid.
Yeah, acid. Now, I think it would have to be... Oh, actually, it's so Tatuaje makes a line called Retro Cuban. So RC. And you'll see it. It's kind of in... They have a couple different sizes, but it's a long, kind of tapered end. It's thicker on one side and shorter on the other, and it has tinfoil on one side. So the Retro Cuban, I believe, what number is it? The 290. It's essentially it's called the Spike because it's a 9 by like 50. It's like a 9 by 58 at one side and then tapers down. That was one of my favorites, and actually it was from 2013, and it had been aging. And Anthony Rosici, who I mentioned before, he finds these super rare stuff, and that thing was incredible. It was like a 3-hour smoke, and I enjoyed it the entire time. I prefer shorter or smaller ring gauge stuff, just in general, because I get bored very easily if it's not a very complex cigar. So that thing, to be able to keep my attention for 3 hours, was just incredible.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So what would be some of the cigars that you would recommend? Like, probably should have had this toward the front, because the women who are looking for gift ideas are not going to make it this far.
Yeah.
But like, okay, what cigars would you recommend? It's like, hey, I'm looking to get them as a gift for somebody who knows cigars really well.
Knows cigars. Yeah. I would say Aganorsa Rare Leaf. Their Maduro is incredible. Warp's Nicotina or the Maestro del Tiempo, either of those two. Foundation's Olmec that we mentioned previously. I would say there's two. There's a Maduro and a Claro. I prefer the Claro. I think it's just incredible. Maduro is still fantastic, but the Claro for me is the favorite. Dapper, their Desvalito, the Lonsdale, the blue label. Or La Madrina Strayed, also by Dapper. There's two La Madrinas. Both are fantastic. The shade for me is incredible. What else? I want to throw one more in there. HVC 500th anniversary. Yeah. That's a harder one to find, but if you can find it, it's fantastic.
Yeah, you got them while I was out of town, and I couldn't get any of them. I'm still a little upset about that one. Yeah. But okay, so who belongs on the Mount Rushmore of cigars? Both people and actual cigars.
People and actual cigars. For the people, I would say Nick Melillo from Foundation, Terrence Riley from Aganorsa. He really was the guy that was behind all of the rebranding and just basically made what the transition is today into how popular Aganorsa is today. Eric Espinoza, and then who would be my final one? Let's see.
Queen Isabella.
Queen Isabella. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'll say Queen Isabella.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. And
a dishonorable mention that still needs to be said is Fidel Castro. I say dishonorable just because of who he is, but he's responsible for the Lancero. He loved long, small ring gauge stuff, and it was a special size just made for him, and he made it popular. It was basically invented for him, but yeah. We wouldn't have the Lancero if it wasn't for Fidel.
Okay, so it's like, we like the Lancero, but not the guy who popularized it. Okay,
Yeah.
I see. Good to know. I didn't know that. I'm going to go throw away all my Lanceros now.
Yeah.
Okay, well, cool. So on the for actual cigars though, top 5 all time?
Top 5 all time. Number 1, Maestro del Tiempo. Number 2, Olmec Claro. Number 3, Desvalito, the Lonsdale. Number 4, Aganorsa's Valdacion, Connecticut.
What about their Supreme Leaf?
Yeah, yeah. Supreme Leaf's great. The problem with Supreme Leaf is you have to find it in a great size. All of them are fantastic blends, but every production they do every year is a different size. So really dependent on the blend, what you really like. The Corona Gorda is absolutely fantastic. I honestly would say, though, the Rare Leaf Maduro by Aganorsa would be my number 5. And then the Supreme Leaf.
Oh.
And the Corona Gorda size. But,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, is there any topic that we didn't get to that you would like to bring up now?
I'm trying to think. What didn't we talk about? Oh, well, I didn't get to finish my story about Nick Melillo.
Oh, yeah.
So, my favorite kind of memory in the industry was getting to meet Nick Melillo. But at the time, we were growing our own tobacco, which was Connecticut broadleaf, which he's known for. And so I just sat there for like 5-10 minutes just talking about what we were doing, growing in an Ohio River Valley, kind of the process of why we chose that over like Pennsylvania broadleaf. The decision with that was the soil types are very similar within the Connecticut River Valley and the Ohio River Valley. versus what typically they grow Pennsylvania broadleaf, which tends to be very heavy clay. So that's kind of the reason why we went, with that varietal. But just talking to him for 5-10 minutes, picking his brain about what we should do, when we should harvest, how we cure it, every little part of the tobacco growing. He just gave me so much knowledge, and just actually sitting there and talking with the guy, and he giving you his full attention. It was just it's like I said, my favorite memory.
Nice. Okay. So cool. So Nick Melillo, a very gracious guy.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
An exception to the rule of never meet your heroes.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, cool. Well, that's awesome. Well, and for those of you that have stuck around for like this hour and 20-minute long interview, didn't feel that long. Although, like, my cigar tells a different story.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, well, thanks Matt, for your time.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, viewer, for spending this long. And if you have any questions, like I said, I'll have their channel in the description, so go check them out, subscribe, and if anything else cool happens from Chesterton's that we're not talking about, you'll probably hear about it from there first. So anyway, Matt, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Kyle.
All right.